After developing the innovative and influential System Shock 2, Irrational Games entered development hell with 2 projects they never finished. But continuing on from the fiasco of Deep Cover and The Lost, they made the beloved all-ages title Freedom Force. This success drew the attention of Tribe's publisher Vivendi, leading to Tribe's Vengeance in 2004. So impressed was Vivendi that they signed Irrational on for another unrelated franchise unlike anything they'd done before. Little did they know that this would be their last project as an independent studio. The SWAT series of shooters had established itself as an ultra-realistic alternative to its trigger-happy sci-fi brethren, like, for example, System Shock. But even though Irrational had made its name with heavily stylized games, Vivendi believed in the studio and asked them to create the next game in the franchise. Irrational embraced the challenge and got to work on SWAT 4.
Police, on your knees! Police, drop your weapon!
Don't shoot!
Drop your weapon!
Though their previous games had been fantasy fare, Irrational had always emphasized atmosphere above all else, using attention to detail and engrossing art design to immerse its players. SWAT 4 continued this trend, detailing out every alleyway and every room so it looked absolutely authentic. Gameplay-wise, it stuck to the series' trademark: real-world police tactics and accurate physics. Bullets penetrate objects, enemies will limp away if hit in the leg, and more points are rewarded for fewer shots fired and fewer enemies killed. It's a shooter that encourages you not to shoot, but to subdue. In a market saturated with games encouraging bloody killing sprees, the SWAT franchise always emphasized restraint. SWAT 4 was no different and was praised by critics as a fantastic new entry into an already great series. It helped cement Irrational's status as a multifaceted developer that could bring quality into any playstyle. After SWAT 4, they began work on a new game in the series. This time, they wanted to pit the world's best policemen against their toughest challenge yet: zombies. Vivendi liked the idea of a zombie shooter, but insisted that it didn't fit with the ultra-realistic SWAT franchise. And so the project was renamed Division 9. But by this time, Irrational had done so well across so many genres, styles, and franchises that major publisher Take-Two Interactive offered to buy them outright. The buyout would mean a massive influx in resources for the company, which would allow them to remain competitive in an increasingly expensive industry. And so, in early 2006, Irrational announced that they would become part of Take-Two under its 2K game division. While the extra funding would allow them to make AAA games, Division 9 was not to be among them. 2K told the studio that they simply weren't interested in the zombie shooter and canceled it. To associate the company with the new owners, Irrational agreed to give up its name. The two studios were now 2K Boston and 2K Australia. With its new minting and Division 9 cancelled, 2K Boston focused on the one game it had in development: BioShock, an underwater study in morality, individuality, and creepiness.
Is it someone new?
It was a game that underwent a lot of changes in its development cycle. Originally, Irrational's creative director, now 2K Boston's creative director, Ken Levine, wanted to follow the political exploits of a psychological deprogrammer. Somehow, this managed to evolve into a story of a plane crash survivor in 1960 who just so happens to stumble onto a decaying submarine city. The changes were signs of Irrational's willingness to abandon concepts that didn't work, to ensure that the finished product was as interesting, engaging, and coherent as possible. The finished product had a strong philosophical underpinning, taking Ayn Rand's objectivist theory and turning it on its head. The result was a morally challenging narrative that forced gamers to question the balance between government and individuals.
Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God.
It even dared to give the enemies personalities instead of making them faceless monsters. Famously, BioShock featured the Little Sisters, young girls that the player could either save for long-term rewards or kill for short-term benefits.
Thank you.
Added to Irrational's trademark attention to atmosphere and art design, and the result was an engrossing, complex game that made players use their heads as well as their trigger fingers. The gameplay borrowed heavily from System Shock 2, with both guns and powers for the gamer to play with. Both of these could be modified and upgraded as the game progressed, and different attacks could be combined in any way the gamer chose. This meant that, like in System Shock 2, different obstacles could be overcome in different ways, adding to the replay value of the title. However, BioShock would also be the first game in Irrational's history to feature no multiplayer at all. On release, the game received fawning praise by critics, many of whom called it the company's finest to date. BioShock went on to be a smash hit, with its much-hyped Big Daddy becoming one of the industry's most iconic monsters. With such a big seller in such a distinctive world, it was inevitable that 2K Boston would announce BioShock 2. Except that they didn't. Shortly after BioShock's release, Take-Two decided they wanted another 2K studio in Northern California, and asked their Boston studio if they'd be willing to have some employees transfer there. The new studio, 2K Marin, would end up getting several employees from 2K Boston, plus one additional item: the rights to BioShock 2. Ken Levine, the creative director of the first game, had decided not to work on the sequel. Rather, he wanted to pursue new, original ideas. Founded around Irrational veterans, 2K Marin will take the BioShock franchise into the 70s, placing gamers in the shoes of a Big Daddy. With new monsters and a new arch-villain, it remains to be seen if the crew can keep to the atmosphere and psychology that made the first game such a towering success. To do so, the Marin crew is getting help from other studios. 2K Australia, which used to be Irrational Canberra, is lending their talents, as well as 2K China and Arcane, with Digital Extremes finally bringing multiplayer into BioShock's world. Releasing in February 2010, it is set to be another commercial smash.
Illusion, or the pain of a phantom limb. To one man, they are as real as rain.
At the moment, nobody knows what the 2K Boston crew is up to. But in January of 2010, they announced that they were reclaiming their old name and are once again Irrational. Ken Levine has promised that their next game will be both a surprise and an obvious choice to longtime fans of Irrational, and 2K Boston, and Irrational again. But judging from their history, it will be an atmospheric, moody, challenging game that emphasizes a few core gameplay mechanics in a polished, balanced package. All from a company founded on 3 core principles that have led to some of the greatest games of their era.
Join us!
Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
The bomb has been planted!